Hello, everyone. Welcome and happy Pride. Please let us know who you are, where you're coming from, your pronouns, and what brought you to today's conversation. This is the third and final part in our virtual Pride series. It's called Queer and Undocumented, and we will be talking about the lived experiences of undocumented queer, trans, and gender nonconforming folks in the United States. And this is a special collaboration between my organization, Change Lawyers, and Oasis Legal Services. My name is Carlos. I use he and they pronouns. I'm the Chief Content Director at Change Lawyers. And what we do is that we fund the next generation of BIPOC and queer lawyers, activists, and change makers. And I very quickly want to introduce our special guest today. So first, I want to introduce Ari Jones, who will be moderating today's conversation. And Ari is a lawyer from Oasis. So welcome, Ari, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And I also want to introduce our first guest, who Ari will be chatting with for the first 15 to 20 minutes, Grecia Martinez Rosas, who is the Executive Director of United We Dream. Hi, Grecia. Thank you for being here.
What's up, Carlos? What's up, buddy? So good to be on.
So good to have you, and so good to have your perspective on this conversation, because honestly, I very rarely hear these types of conversations happening. So for those of you joining us, Grecia is the Executive Director of United We Dream, and they are the largest immigrant youth-led network in the country with more than 800,000 members, and that is amazing, Grecia. Like, you as a young person are the leader and really the movement builder of this incredible group of people. And so I'm really eager to hear how you organize the strategy and the architecture for what you all do and how you implement it too, which even today, you're going to be part of that later on once you leave us. So Ari, take it away. I'll let the two of you talk. And then just for folks in the audience, just note that at about 12:20 California time, we'll be introducing a few other guests and panelists. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Carlos. Yeah, like Carlos mentioned, Grecia has very important work. I don't know if you want to give folks just a little window into what it means to be executive director and maybe like why you have to hop off because you're so busy, have lots of things to do.
Yeah, well, at first I just want to say, Ari, how excited I am to be with you today. My name is Grecia Martinez Rosas. I use she, her, ella pronouns. My friends and homies call me G. And I am really, I think an executive director role, depending on like which ecosystem you exist on, like varies. I see myself as an organizer, accountable to a larger group of people, and I have my role and responsibilities within an ecosystem. I'm a part of a team. I'm part of the best team in the game, which is the folks that are part of United We Dream. And the reason why we're in this moment of opportunity is, and a lot of urgency is that for the longest time, we've been calling for the abolishment of ICE and CBP because they are targeting undocumented people, queer people, the people that we love, without seeing any protections for undocumented folks by way of citizenship or permanent protections. And so in the election of Joe Biden as president and the Democrats having the House and the Senate control, they have the opportunity and responsibility to deliver citizenship for millions of undocumented people, to cut funding of ICE and CBP, and to ensure that we're delivering on things like the Breathe Act, the Thrive Act, the Green New Deal. And so part of my job is to make sure that I keep the trains running in our campaign, the Undeniable campaign and the We Are Home campaign. So we're in the big peak of activity, and I'm really honored though to be part of this conversation and to dig in and to get to know you more. I've been really a fan of the work of Oasis and Change Lawyers, and I'm really excited to be on this call today.
Oh, well, just be us fan peopling. They're definitely a fan too. That's fantastic and such important work. And I'm so glad that we have folks like you doing this advocacy, running those trains. So yeah, this panel is really about centering lived experiences of folks who are undocumented or formerly undocumented. I was wondering if we could start by you telling us, just for the folks in the room virtually, a little bit about your experience coming to the United States and interacting with the U.S. immigration system.
Wow, Ari, I love that you like to get in to go in deep quickly. Well, I am, as I shared, the daughter of Luis and Elia Martinez. They were my parents. They shaped everything about me, and they made they created the environment for me to be able to thrive. And one of the choices that we made together is to come to the United States when I was 7 years old. I still remember crossing the Rio Grande waters and like how cold the water felt in my skin, and like feeling like really like afraid of what was happening, but also really like filled with like opportunity and hope that things would get better, that like the complete poverty that we lived on, that the violence that we faced every day, maybe it'll be better after we cross these waters. And it did. I was so happy and proud to be able to land in Dallas, Texas, where I grew up with my family. My dad was like a Southern Baptist preacher. My mom was the COO of our home and ensuring that like everything moved. And, you know, for me, like I've always known that I was undocumented. It's difficult to forget like a big life event, like crossing a border. And I was really ashamed. And I was really scared. I didn't know if I could tell my teachers. I didn't know, what would happen to my family, but I knew that I needed to hide and that I needed to keep my head down, get good grades, don't make too much noise, and just like get through it to make the sacrifices of my parents worth it. And I just remember feeling like, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, Ari, or folks on the call, but there's like this knot in your stomach when you think that, oh man, something may go wrong. There was like this knot in my stomach all the time when my dad would drive away from home to go to work, and knowing that he didn't have a driver's license and that if he was just stopped, he could be detained and deported. Right. And unfortunately, when I was, 17, that's exactly what happened. My dad was driving home from work. He was stopped. He didn't have a driver's license, and in a matter of days, he was deported. And my whole life came crashing around me. I just didn't know what to do at that point. I was the oldest of four and like the lead and the head of my family at such a young age. And I couldn't understand how the police their jobs would be to like separate me from my father. So I think that's a bit of like my story. I'll say that I am blessed that though I'm not a Southern Baptist anymore because of very obvious reasons and some challenges there, I believe that I was blessed to be able to be part of the immigrant rights movement, where I saw queer people like clearly embrace the joteria, like the queer spirit of being able to say that we were both undocumented and unafraid. I met United We Dream in that moment where I was really lost and I didn't know what to do. And I got the training, the organizing skills that I needed to not only transform my community, but transform my life. And by seeing the courage of those young organizers, like Jorge Gutierrez and many others, I was able to like really embrace a part of me that even more than being undocumented, I had never come out to anyone as queer. And it wasn't until I saw the courage of those folks that I said, it's something that I want to make sure that I'm living into, which is why I'm excited to be here, because I hope to be able to continue to create places of transformation for people just like the one that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see a lot of parallels in the way you were talking about, not being sure how your teachers would react, not being sure if you could like share this information that a lot of queer people feel, and like disclosing their status, or if we talk about like HIV status or things where we have that fear of that societal response. Thank you for sharing that. I think your answer dovetails right into my next question, which is about how has living at this intersection of being, undocumented and queer influenced how you organize, how you, come at activism and social change? How does that influence, your strategies and your work?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think that the saying of like, we do not lead single issue lives, and the idea that like really comes from Black radical women liberation theology, that we are exactly the right people at the right time to be able to lead in this moment. I think that is what I feel myself grounded in my work when we're in conversations, whether it be with decision makers, with our community members, being really grounded that like our experiences, I don't have to take off my rainbow parts of myself when I'm talking about undocumented status, or when I'm talking about being a queer woman, or being a survivor of sexual violence, or being all of the different iterations of the parts of myself that I fully embrace and have given me the tenacity and the clarity to move forward, that is not a liability, but rather it is like the power that has allowed me to not only survive, thrive, but also like organize with my community. And I think at United We Dream, we say that like the people closest to the pain are also closest to the solutions, the innovations, and the breakthroughs. And it harkens back to a conversation that I know we had with civil rights leaders and elders in the South that led the work with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And when we were asking them for advice on how we should think about our work, they said, get you a group of people that can feel it in their bones, that know what victory tastes like, what the pain feels like in their bones. That's going to be the group that's going to create the sharpest strategy, that is going to be clear about the ultimate goal. And so for me, it's about, yes, there are like some political and policy implications and priorities that are important, which is why we're driving these campaigns. But at the end of the day, I think part of the legacy that we will be able to leave behind in our work is this legacy of creating spaces where the discipline of hope is like at the core of our strategy and decision making. And so I think that for queer people, the nights that I felt like maybe something was wrong with me, maybe like my Christian parents weren't going to embrace me, or that maybe it was too much and I didn't want to like lean into that true part of myself, that the thing that got me through those nights and those moments was this, the voice of my mom in my head telling me like, tú puedes, güerita, like you can do it. And I just feel like I want to be part of that legacy for other people, where we're encouraging one another, where we're super clear about our power, and we're delivering real ass wins to people's lives, while we're also looking at what my coach calls like the long arc of history, that my work will be necessary, but not sufficient. And then my job is to ensure that there are many others, just like you, Ari, like Carlos, like many others on this call, that will ensure that the legacy of queer people, of people of color, of Black women, and that work continues.
Right. Yeah. Really thinking about the long term. I think that's so much of what you said has been very inspirational. Thank you for folks in the comments also calling it out. I see you. Hopefully maybe not the last question, but maybe the last question. I want to make sure we get this, because we have a lot of lawyers on the call, folks who are thinking about going to law school or maybe in law school, and service providers, folks who might be interacting in that way with folks. Do you have any advice or action items for folks who want to better show up and support queer immigrants? Yeah, what should folks be thinking about?
I love that. I'll say three things. The first thing is that our collective job is to ensure that people are able to create conditions where people can move from a place of hope, hopelessness to hope of like feeling isolated to feeling in community. So if your work contributes to making people feel like they're victims, if your work contributes to isolation, if your work contributes to like some sort of like savior complex, then like if you can acknowledge that, then like you're in the right pathway to ensure that you're making the shifts necessary. But like the work needs to make sure that like you're moving people from hopelessness to hope and into community. I think the second thing that I'll say is that it is important and necessary for us to really be grounded in like a trauma-informed response and like trauma-informed work and service and organizing. And when I say that is that, you know, oftentimes for queer immigrant folks, there is a sense of like, oh, you've achieved so much and like you're so resilient and like how great that that's part of it. But the resiliency comes from a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, and it's the life's work that will be put into undoing that, unlearning and relearning different things. And so it'll be important that no matter where you are, whether you're a lawyer dealing with a client, whether you're a service provider, whether you're an organizer, that you keep a trauma-informed analysis and lens in how you do that, so that you're supporting the work and that person is doing at that time. And then the third thing I'll say is that no matter where you are, I think that I have the privilege to work with some amazing lawyers. I work with them in partnership, and we won at the Supreme Court and district courts and all of those things. And with service providers that are like putting their heart, sweat, and tears to surviving this pandemic that was a confluence of a spike in anti-Blackness and xenophobic attitudes, as well as like expulsions or exclusions of undocumented folks and Black and brown folks from our healthcare systems. No matter what you're doing, if you are grounded in this possibility of joy, of like in any space that you can create joy and opportunity for folks to really be exactly who they should be, that is like already, I think, an intervention in the way and the status quo. So I remember having a meeting with like super fancy lawyers, you know, like in the lawyer world, like the Supreme Court litigators and stuff like that. And also lawyers that like, you know, dedicated a lot of time for school, etc. And we played like, we had like a check-in question about like, what's your favorite like color? And like, we made them tell us what their favorite song was. And I think that the places where we were most effective is when people allowed themselves to be human, even those roles, and reach for joy in those moments. And so I think that would be my third piece, is that if it's not a joyful relationship, if it's not grounded in like you equally sharing or sharing some piece of your humanity with the folks that you're in, then it's a transactional relationship. And, you know, sometimes those things have a place, but if you want to transform, if you want to have systemic impact, it will require you to be present, to be human, and to be in joy.
Absolutely. And also sounds like a way to make work a lot more sustainable for bringing joy.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. This fantastic. Thank you for all of your time. That was incredible. I know you have to run, but just really, thank you so much for joining us. That was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Ari. Such an honor to meet you and to be with all of you today.
Yes. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. We did it. Pride is 365. So I think we'll keep celebrating, but I'm glad we had this month.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carlos. Okay, so now we're going to bring on a couple of our other presenters. I am very excited to introduce two wonderful folks. We'll have Paul Crego, Deputy Director and Director of Policy and Programs at the SF Office of Transgender Initiatives. Hi, Paul.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Ari. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Me too. I'm going to give a little more bio for you. Pao is a bicultural, queer, and trans immigrant who has worked in trans communities for the past 15 years in San Francisco and internationally. His work in community-based organizations has included work with Larkin Street Youth Services, La para Trans Latinas, and also part-time faculty at the Health Education Department at City College of San Francisco. Pao's also a published author, translator, and all-around incredible advocate. So thank you so much for joining us, Pao.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yay! And now I'll also welcome Milton Ramirez. Milton is a former client of Oasis Legal Services and an incredible drag queen. If you have not had the pleasure of seeing Lulu Ramirez tear up the stage in the Bay Area, then I'm sorry, you've missed out. Lulu is so incredible, and I'm so glad that we could have Milton join us. Milton, are you still on the call? Where we lost? We may have lost Milton's connection. This is live. This is live organizing. This is what happens. Technical difficulties. I just sent Milton a message. Hopefully we'll be able to bring him back on. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with you, Pao. So exciting. Great. So I asked Grecia this question, and I'm curious. She sort of, connected a lot of her history with her immigrant experience and also to coming out. And I'm curious if you also feel like, your experience as a queer individual has impacted your experience as an immigrant.
Yeah, so first I want to say, Grace is so inspiring. I don't think I've seen her speak before, and that's going to be hard to go after. So I'll just put that out there. But I do, I think my experience has been different in the sense that I came into my queerness and my transness as a really young person, but I did not become an immigrant until I was a young adult. So I moved to the US when I was 20 years old. I moved on my own without family. And so that was very, that was its own thing. And I have family and I had community back in Spain where I'm from that did have to interact a lot with the immigration systems there. But I really kind of came into my trans and queer experiences first. And then mostly because of just not having much opportunity and not seeing much of a place for myself in Spain in terms of the work that I wanted to do and kind of being able to just be trans and queer and out in my work, I decided to try to move to San Francisco in the Bay Area. And so that really kind of, my queerness totally is the reason why I became an immigrant. And I think there's a lot of ways in which my immigration experiences and my queer and trans experiences have intersected. And we can talk more about that.
Hi, Milton. How are you? We can see you, Milton. Oh, no, come back.
Sorry about that, kids. I cannot
That's okay.
see you guys.
We got you. We can see you. Can you hear us? Let me see. There you are.
Hello, everybody. Milton here. Thank you for having me, Ari, and everybody. Thank you for being here. Just joining. My name is Milton Ramirez, aka Lulu Ramirez. I'm dragging, but I'm here. Hello.
Yes. Hi. I'm going to start with the same question for you too. What we're talking about is how your identities overlap and interact with each other, being formerly undocumented and an immigrant, and also being queer, being out, gay, drag queen, all of those things. How has your experience been a combination of those two things. So how's your experience as a queer individual impacted your experience as an immigrant?
It was really hard at the beginning. I moved here in 1996 when I was 20 18 years old. And thankfully, my mom was here, but I wasn't fully openly gay at the time. So I had two things on my plate. The first one was that I was always scared to not get in trouble with anything or anybody, because the last thing I want to do is go back to where I came from, what I was running from. Because back in the days, it's still now, in El Salvador, where I'm from, it's a taboo. So getting here, it was like my safe place to be. So I didn't want to ruin it for me or my family. So I wanted to do the right thing, but work hard. I actually, instead of going to school, I went to school and learned English. I was speaking English already like a year after, going on 2. My sisters and we got here almost at the same time, like with the months of difference, and I speak better English than them. Better, not good. So, but anyway, so the point is that I try my best to do the right thing and stay in the right path, because I was scared to go back to where I came from, and I was eager to become something better for myself and my family. So, and it was crazy because it was too much for me. First, I wasn't out completely, and second of all, I was illegal at the time. So it's like I had to watch my back everywhere. So I was living like in the scary. Um, I was kind of scared all around for a bunch of years. So, but I
Yeah.
tried to do the right thing the whole time I was doing it. So
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. Absolutely. Would you feel comfortable sharing with us some about your experience coming out? What allowed you to feel safe to do that, or what that experience was like?
So I came out of my mom's to my mom's because that was the only person that I really care, and my sisters. I came out of her and I told her, Mom, I'm gay. Your parents will always know, because your parents know you better than anybody. They just don't want to see it, especially in the Latino community. Your parents know, but they just don't want to know it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was my mom at the time, because my mom was like a strong woman, and yada yada. And I was like, okay, I have to confront her and say, Mom, I have a boyfriend. But I got a boyfriend first so I can feel your strong and
Mm-hmm.
talk to her. She said, you have to go or something. I'm like, okay, I have a boyfriend to back me up and we're moving together, because we were that kind of relationship at the time. So, but the surprise for me was when I told my mom, of course, as a Latino parent, what did I do wrong? Why?
Mm,
So, and I was like, Mom, it's not you. It just, that's the way I am. But,
right.
and I said, but if you want me to leave your house, I have no problem. But the first thing she said, how can I not love you? She said, if I don't love
Mm,
you, how do I expect the world to love you? So no, you
mm,
have my full support. So we had an amazing conversation, and um, my mom is my best friend now, thanks to that. And
mm,
my life became easier, because then my sisters and everybody in my family became very, and also they will look up to me because I was never getting in trouble,
mm,
and I was always trying to step ahead, try to be better, do the right thing, try to create things. Even in my drag community part, um, I created jobs for other younger queers who just starting to do shows,
right.
and it was hard for me because nobody told me how to do it. I learned
Yeah.
on my own. So now
Yeah.
I wish not the same thing for anybody else, because it was hard for me, because I don't know where to go, I don't know where to do, and I have to find out the hard way by myself. But thanks
Right.
to that, now I can, um, thanks to that, now I can help people, you know? So my
Right.
experience is my rough path was a good thing in the end of the day, because I can help others now to make
Right.
their life
Thank you.
easier. Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Milton. I think you're really hitting on a lot of overlapping issues. And I want to kind of come back to that too. for Pau. You know, how have these interacting forces, we've got folks experiencing racism, like Grecia said, xenophobia, absolutely, other systemic forces around, you know, how we value different immigrants in this country and interact there. How has that impacted your ability to live openly, both in terms of your queer identity, immigrant identity?
Is that for me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I mean, I think that you know, I hold a lot of privileges that allow me to navigate the world in the US in a way where people don't even realize that I'm an immigrant most of the time. They just assume I'm like a white person from the US. And like, I think that affords me a lot of access that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I think sometimes like, you know, that is helpful for me sometimes because I, you know, don't always have to disclose that I'm an immigrant and I don't have to kind of experience the same level of xenophobia that other people experience. But I think that there's, you know, there's also kind of the other side of that of like sometimes feeling a bit invisible, even within queer immigrant communities, and just kind of, you know, trying to figure out how to navigate that, how to like acknowledge the ways in which obviously I have privilege. I have a lot of like immigration privilege in the sense that the way that I migrated to the US is very different from a lot of other queer folks. And there's also kind of complications around my trans experience and my immigrant experience being very interrelated, right? Like I did not have access to changing my legal name and gender because of my immigration situation for a long time.
Right.
And then I had to kind of navigate that through my country of origin, which then meant like it took like years and years and years to get to finally getting correct documentation. And that's something that up until very recently, even though I've been out as trans for like almost 20 years, like only in the last few years I've had like all my documents that have the same information. And so I don't get kind of stopped at the airport and asked why I have different documentation, and, you know, like condescending, like airport people are like, oh, you really should get that changed. Like, it's just, yeah.
I wish.
I know, right? Like, thank you for that. Yeah. So I'm not sure that I fully answered that, but that's kind of.
No. I think that's really helpful, and I'll call this out as like a new thing. I too do not have documentation that matches. You know, my driver's license says one thing, my passport says another, and the Department of State actually just announced that they are on a pathway to creating X markers for, or some, we're saying X marker, we'll see, some kind of option for people who are non-binary, gender non-conforming, and that's very exciting, and that has been literal decades in the making. So. Yeah, it can be a thing. I'm a US citizen and I can't access documentation that actually matches, let alone for folks who are dealing with the fact that they would need to rely on their home country to update things too. So thank you for bringing that. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think like access to that is so dependent on the specific type of like, if someone is undocumented versus has like a U visa or different kinds of visas, like that really makes a difference in how people can get legal and gender recognition. And we know that that's like a huge barrier for trans folks to access things like employment, education, like all those things that we kind of need to like survive. It's so much harder when you don't have documentation that feels safe to kind of share.
Yeah, absolutely. Milton, I'm going to ask a sort of related question. So we've talked about, you know, how you came out, and the support from your mom. Can you speak a little bit about finding support in terms of legal support? So maybe how you found Oasis and what your experience was like working with, maybe first with the sanctuary and then with the folks at Oasis.
So, well, at first, you know, for all the Salvadorians, we got the the protected status, temporary protected status for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, personally, I felt like I was still unsafe with that status. I feel like if anything happened, I will be on my way to a place where I didn't want to be, where I came from running, you know? So, uh, and also I was so afraid to look deep to see if I can fix my status, because I was like, what if, you always have that in the back of your head. It's like, what if it doesn't work for me and I end up like facing immigration with protection. So anyway, that was one of the things that were holding me back until a few friends of mine said, there's an option now. And if you would have applied a year once you got here, you would have been. But at the time, I don't remember any of this.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody talking about assignments or any of that that I remember. I was scared, and I had never heard of it. So I was like, okay. So I had a conversation, and the moment I connected with the finally got to have the conversation about like how can I upgrade my status, like how can I change my status to be a little bit safe. I felt hope. Like honestly, I started the Century, and then Maria Elena brought my case to Oasis, and everything I felt after I was helped, it was like hope and safe. I feel hopeful and safe. Everything I was doing, I feel like, okay, now I can do it better. Now I can help others get in the same path. Because nobody told me this before. So the best thing it happens to me was get connected with Oasis and queer folks who were like helping me to become safe and be myself without being scared of the police will cut me and will deport me, or I can't be myself because of that I can go back to my country. That was always in my head at the time. But all I have to say is that the job you guys do, you probably don't think about it when you start a case, how you guys change everybody's life. It's incredible. Oh my God. It's crazy.
It's really...
My life changed. My family changed.
Yeah.
Wow. It's incredible. And I'm always going to be thankful. And every time I can do a little bit for Oasis, I will, because thanks to that, my mom now is a resident. I'm a citizen of the United States, and I keep on fighting and on the right path. And I'm just thankful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We're thankful for you. I mean, I think what you're saying is literally what Gresa was talking about, moving from a place of hopelessness to hope, and that's absolutely the goal. And what Milton was talking about for our audience too is that there's a rule that says for asylum that people are generally required to apply within 1 year of coming to this country after the last entry. And that's just impossible for most people, for folks that are afraid, like Milton was saying, that aren't aware, that most people are not aware, that most lawyers aren't aware of exceptions for that rule. And so that's exactly why Oasis exists, to help people who are facing that kind of situation, to provide that support. So thank you. Thank you for sharing, Milton.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I want to turn over to sort of what you're doing in your work, Pao, as well. What are local governments, like San Francisco or others too, what kind of programs are they implementing or policies to better support and create inclusion for people who are queer and trans immigrants?
Yeah, thank you, Ari. I mean, I think, just to highlight that the work that Oasis does and other LGBTQ immigration organizations do are so important, because we tend to have a lot of organizations that help immigrants and then organizations that help LGBT people, but not a lot that kind of address that intersection of experience. And I know that I've seen that in a lot of different services. Like when I used to work at Ela para Trans Latinas, I would take some of my clients to get professional development services at an LGBT organization, but there were no one there could help them in Spanish, and no one there could help them navigate professional development as immigrants and as undocumented immigrants sometimes. And then similarly, if I went to an immigration organization, then they couldn't get kind of the same level of care and understanding that they would get for their queer and trans identities. So just wanting to highlight that, and I think that's one of the things that in San Francisco, I feel like, you know, we always need to do more, but I feel like is very unique compared to other places. And so I guess kind of going back to your question, I think, you know, local governments can do policies like becoming a sanctuary city, creating health services and other benefits for undocumented folks and immigrants of all kind of status, because we know that when folks are immigrants and especially undocumented, they have more barriers to accessing like any kind of like cash benefits, like food stamps, healthcare, everything, right? And so really making sure that those services are accessible regardless of immigration status is super important. And similarly, I think, you know, not to like, what's the word? Like not to kind of say good stuff about ourselves or something, but I think City College of San Francisco does a really great job also, and like now the classes are all free for residents of San Francisco regardless of immigration status, and I think that really helps also with just access to like professional development and learning and addressing language barriers, right? And I think that's another big thing, is the importance of making sure that services are language accessible. And we need to do a lot more of that, I think, everywhere, including in San Francisco. But I know that that's a really big component to how folks will feel safe accessing those services.
Yeah, absolutely. The first people I worked with starting out as a law student were folks who spoke indigenous languages from Guatemala and El Salvador, and like not being able to communicate or relying on a family member or maybe someone who spoke mom from a different neighborhood. It was so hard. It is such a barrier. So thank you for highlighting that. I totally agree. Thank you, Carlos, for putting up the message about questions. If folks want to drop questions in the chat, we definitely will have time. Thank you so much for talking about those services too. I absolutely agree. And shout out to finally Governor Newsom signing the law to expand Medi-Cal for folks over 50, regardless of immigration status. That just passed last week and is so exciting. And maybe then we'll get it for everyone. It would have a huge impact. Like Pao was saying, many of our clients who are asylum seekers, who are in the process of applying, are completely ineligible for any kind of public assistance. There just aren't services available for asylum seekers, as opposed to us people with asylum or people who have refugee status. So very important to call attention to that. Along those same lines, Milton, what kind of support do you wish that you had received when you first got to the United States in terms of immigrant status, being queer, anything? What kind of support do you wish you had?
The one that Oasis have provided for me. Definitely. If I think my life would be automatically a different story, since if at that time something like Oasis would exist, because the way that I felt the moment they took my case, it's priceless, and it's a security feeling, like safe feeling. That's all I can say. Because I don't think at the time when I came, all these possibilities were available, you know?
Yeah, it just wasn't
or
enough.
Maybe they were, but I was too afraid to look for them.
There's very little awareness, absolutely. And we hear from clients all the time who, you know, they went to for lack of a better term, a random lawyer, a lawyer that didn't really ask about their sexual orientation or gender identity, certainly didn't make them feel safe to disclose it. We've heard stories about attorneys who say things like, oh, you need to have an operation if you're going to be eligible. Oh, you need to be out or have had this experience or that experience. And it's very erasive of our clients' lived experiences. So that's exactly why Oasis exists, so that we can focus on this intersection and this work specifically so we can help people like you. So that's really great to hear. Yeah, Carlos, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Well, first of all, thank you to Milton and Powell for sharing your personal stories. As a queer person, I know that it's, it gets easier over time to talk about your coming out, but it never gets easy. And it always, you always have that like edge to it when you retell the story. So thank you for saying this in front of a live audience. Powell, I know that, so where you work is a very unique space. There's not a whole lot of offices of transgender initiatives across the country. And we're very blessed to be in a place like the Bay Area where initiatives like that are funded and prioritized.
Amen.
So I'm wondering what your office, what tools it has at its disposal to help undocumented queer and trans folks that other cities across the country can learn from and copy.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah, so one thing that I wanted to share a little bit more about is our Emerge SF fellowship, which is a professional development fellowship for trans immigrants. And that's a very small program at this stage. It's just it's kind of like a pilot program that we've had for 3 years. But one of the things that I think is really unique about it is we give people a stipend to be with us for 5 months and focus on professional development. And there's requirements of like doing an internship and taking classes at City College. And the classes can be like ESL, or they can be anything else that's related to the person's professional development that they want to address. But most folks do end up wanting to do an ESL because that tends to be kind of the first step for them to be able to access like, better employment or continue with their schooling. And then we also do professional development sessions with them. And so far it's always been in Spanish because the group that we've focused on has been trans women. And I think, the feedback that we get is really positive. And I think one of the really unique things about it is like, we give folks a stipend that is significant so they can actually focus on their professional development and not have to worry so much about like, how do I make ends meet? How do I pay my rent? And can really kind of take the time to focus on that. And then I think in addition to that, some of the work that we do in our office is not so much direct services other than this program, but we do a lot of supporting organizations with accessing or advocating for city funding and new city programming. And so one of the recent exciting things is that the mayor announced that she will be allocating $2 million over the next 2 years for a universal basic income program for trans folks. And that has been thanks to our office and thanks to our trans advisory committee. And I think that's a really good example of something that is so key for immigrants because of not being able to access a lot of other services and a lot of cash assistance.
Yeah, it's something that our other speaker, Arya Saeed, also called out. So very exciting program.
At Change Lawyers, we give out scholarships to folks who are not generally in law school, right? People who don't look like the typical lawyer. And so our programs are very much focused on like identity and being race forward. And so I'm wondering we are a foundation. And so sort of like within the power structure. And I'm wondering what folks who in the audience who might be donors, who fund these scholarship programs, what they should know about the importance of these sort of very explicit identity-based scholarship programs, like the one that you piloted.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crucial because there are truly kind of tangible barriers that come with like certain identities and navigating the world with those identities. And then there's also additional trauma often, which is, doesn't feel as tangible, but has a really big impact on how we can navigate spaces and resources and opportunities. And so I think Like I said, with our Emerge SF program, having that stipend really makes the difference for our participants to be able to kind of just take some time and really focus on like, what do I want to do? Like, for example, one of our participants is like in her 40s and has only ever done sex work in the US. And this fellowship really gave her the opportunity to think like, what do I want to do? And actually start imagining herself doing something else than survival sex work, right? And I think that wouldn't have been possible without that kind of support, like financially, and also the emotional support and the kind of the inspiring hope and possibility, right, for what she could do.
Yeah, and when you add on the extra layer of immigration consequences of criminalized sex work, for example, that could have huge ramifications for someone's life in terms of their immigration status as well. That's amazing.
Ari, I think we have time for one more question. So if you have anything that you would want to ask Paul and Milton to leave us with, feel free.
Yeah, I really just want to, again, end on a sort of action item and thinking about Pride and thinking about folks in the audience who want to show up. So the question is, how can allied community members show up, support queer, undocumented, and other immigrant communities? What are you looking for? What does that look like to you? Either you want to start with Pau?
Sure. I think, obviously like learning and ongoing learning is really important, and kind of individual forms of allyship with the people in your community, with people that you work with, speaking up for people that aren't there. But I think also like looking at your organizations or where you work in and kind of looking at who is there, who is missing, what kind of policies do you have? Like, do you actually have language access? Do you have, is the space accessible for queer and trans people in terms of being seen, in terms of like, do you have a system where folks can come in and if their legal name is different from the name that they actually go by, like that's going to be honored? So I think for me, that's something that has become really important and a big piece of my work. And I think it's something that we can all do in a lot of different settings that we're in.
Absolutely. Excellent. Milton, same question. How can community members show up and support queer, undocumented, and other immigrant communities? Oh, and you're on mute. Hold on. There we go. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. In my opinion, based on from my point of view as a client, I feel like the connection. It's all about the connection. Spread the word when you see people in need of that kind of stuff. Because of that miscommunication, I couldn't have done that earlier or sooner. I couldn't be saved sooner. So in my opinion, it's like communication. Like as a community, we need to spread the word and let people know. Like tell your friends if they need help with whatever. There's an organization who does help you. I have done my share on that part because I'm a drag queen, and a lot of people come to me and talk about like, oh my God, I just got here, Lulu, and I'm running away from my country. And do you know anybody who can help me? There's Oasis. And there's me sending all this new clientele, all these people to get the help that I get. So I feel like communication and spreading the word is my key. It was my key. And it is up until now.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I think this is really, really, really wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much, Pau. Thank you so much, Milton. I can't wait to having this conversation with the two of you. Milton, when is your next performance? Because I want to go.
So I'm hoping in 4 months. Because as I'm sitting right here, I got my ankle surgery 2 days ago. So, and I can't be on heels or active for like 3 to 6 months. But I'll keep you posted on my social media. I'll be doing shows in a wheelchair or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, go follow Lulu on Instagram. Make sure you're following Lulu Ramirez. It's amazing.
We will all be there at the next performance.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
Yay, thank you.
I'm going to take Paul and Milton off screen, but thank you both for joining us. And I think that one action item that I do want to leave folks with is for anyone watching us right now, if you don't know, there's something called Give Out Day. It's a campaign that happens every year for Pride Month, and it basically allows organizations like Oasis to fundraise, to get new donors, and to get a lot of money. It's really, really easy to participate. And so I just want to, one action item is for everyone to follow this link that I'm about to drop in the comments box here on YouTube. This is a link to Oasis's Give Out Day page. And basically, it doesn't even matter how much money you give. It just matters that Oasis receives a lot of small individual donors. And last year, Oasis was the #2 organization in the country who received donations. And if they are the #1 organization to receive donations, they get an additional $10,000 in funding, just like automatically. So we're talking about providing services to people like Milton. Like you all just heard how life-changing that was for him. And as also a formerly undocumented person, I know the difference that having a lawyer on your side can make. Like a good lawyer who's not going to like lie to you and take your money, right? And so folks in the room, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Pride Month. Like Grecia said at the beginning of the hour, Pride never ends. It's 365. And so this is the official end of sort of the calendar Pride Month. But for the queer and trans and gender non-binary folks in the room, Pride is an ongoing journey and experience for us. And so if you can, please give to Oasis during their Give Out Day campaign. It ends tonight at 9 p.m. California time. So you actually have a long time to still give. And you will also receive an email with this recording, as well as the link that I just dropped into the chat box. So thank you so much. And Ari, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, thank you so much, Carlos. It's been an honor to work on this series with Change Lawyers. And again, as a former Change Lawyers fellow, just thank you to this organization. I hope you all continue following Change Lawyers, and I'll see you at the next one. I'll see you at the next event.
All right. Happy Pride. Take care, Ari.